Chapter 6, the application framework. So what is an application framework? An application basically without an application framework, you'd have templates all over the place. The application framework kind of pulls all those templates together into one application. So the application provides what are the things that the application framework mainly provides, and that is a means for global code, global variables, session management, state management, and error handling. So what is the directory structure that is normally present for ColdFusion? You have the web root, and then underneath that you have the application root. Right, and in the application root you have the templates, things kind of organized into like images, includes, etc. So what is the web root? The web root now that is configured, and how the web root and how is it configured? That is mainly configured to the web server's administration interface. So like IIS, it has a web server administration interface, and they link that to, for example, staging.predicto.com, etc. So all the application framework functionality, everything that ties all these pages together, is defined via two files, the application.cfm or the application.cfc. So when a template is to be executed, how does ColdFusion search for the application file that is appropriate? Because remember, the rule is one application file per template. Well, first of all, it will search through the current directory of the file, and it will then search its parent. If you don't find anything, it goes to its parent, and it goes right up to the hard drive of your machine. That's what's very interesting about this whole ColdFusion thing. It's very persistent. And if it finds one application files, it executes it, obviously. If it finds two application files, it executes the one that it finds first. If it's in a directory and it finds an application.cfm and an application.cfc, it executes the application.cfc first instead of the application.cfm. And if there is no application file, then it just executes the template as per normal, right? So the whole point of the application files is that they're globally included in each template, right? So one application file per template. So we had mentioned the uses before: client and session management, error handling, and to provide global variables and global code. So what other things like is expected in can an application file provide? Of course, the most important thing is the name of the application. Every application has to have a name. And it can do things like it can provide default styles and fonts and colors for the application. So like the ME application, then the gray and how the error messages are displayed and how success messages are displayed may be handled globally in the application.cfm or the application.cfc. And application-wide security. We haven't done this much as yet, but like the CF login user, all of that would happen there. Well, happen there. So that's important. So one thing to note about Solaris Linux and HP UX. So that's Solaris Linux you've heard before, HP UX I haven't, but basically that the file names are case sensitive. So on application end, on application start, common and capital letters, whereas necessary. Now, so you have this app page that organizes everything, and you have all these templates that can be called and will be called regardless, but the application.cfn file can never be called itself. it's really just for like a definition, in my opinion. And you know, even though I said before, like you could have like your fonts and colors and styles defined in the application.cfm, it's definitely not the place for any presentation logic. It is something that is supposed to be globally included on all these files. So let's say you have presentation logic that somehow, you know, conflicts with anything on the template that is being considered, then the whole thing could bomb. I guess that's why they don't allow any presentation logic within it. They want something that can be transported from file to file to file without any issues. So we talked about application files in general, and now we go into the specific implementations like the application.cfc and the application.cfm. So the application.cfm is a template, you know, a CFM file, and the .cfc is a component. So that means the application.cfc must be in component tags, and the component name must be application. And you're gonna set a lot of properties. So these are properties of the components that are set within the what you call it, the constructor portion of the component. So I guess when it's not in tags or anything, no function or anything, this is the constructor part of the component, right? So these are the different properties, and how you're going to organize the properties, right? You're going to think of a group of questions like when. So like when does the application start, timeout? When does the session timeout, right? And the default values for these are defined in the CodeFusion administrator, right? So where, as in where you want the client storage to take, where you want the client's storage to take place, and where you want the login storage to take place. And by default, it's a cookie. It's on a cookie that all these client variables and stuff are stored, and all this login information is stored. And what? So like, what do you want? Do you want session management? I guess that needs to be enabled for you to have like session.default_ds then. Or do you want client management? You know, those things are defaulted to false actually. So you have to actually go into the application and set it for you to be able to use these things, right? And what is your name? Of course, the name of the application that can be set there. And what about the cookies? Do you want to be able to set client cookies? Thank goodness that defaults true, because I assume that needs to be set if you're gonna have like client storage. I don't know, I need to check that out. And the domain cookies, so that's like when you have an application that is running on a cluster of servers and you want to have cookies on that cluster. That's where the domain cookies come in. You need to check that out. Alright, so let's talk about, so we talked about the properties of the application.cfc. Now we're going to talk about the methods of the application.cfc. And you see, the way to remember the methods is to remember the main components of the application, like the application, then the session, the request, and then the error. So those are the main components in my eyes. So you're going to have on application start, on application end, on session start, on session end, on request start, on request end, and then you have the error that could occur anywhere. The special thing about the request section though is that you have a function that's executed in lieu of a certain template. So so on request, like template1.cfm executes in place of template1.cfm at all times. So this is a way of basically saying if template1 is the first page, it can stop a user from actually going there, ever going there, right? So so like in the on so you would think that the order would be on application start, on session start, on request start, on request, then on request end, then on session end, and then on application end. But the on application end, it doesn't just, and the on session end, they don't just execute like that. They execute like when a session times out or when an application times out, right? So in the application.cfc component, like I said, in the initialization section, the floating section, you have all these initialization of variables, and in the function section you have like the on application start, on session start, and so on. So in the on application start, that is where you set all the application variables. So like application dot data source would be OWS, and and then in the session section, on session start, you have like the session.shopping cart being created. The session.shopping cart is a struct new, and session.shopping cart items is an array of dimension 1, for example. Those are things that you can do. But in general, the on application start is used to set application data, and the on session start is used to set session data, and the on request start is to set request data, right? So on application data for the whole application, session data for the whole session, and request data for a whole page. So when you say, like I said, on request template 1, it executes in place of the template, right? And the only way that template will be executed is if you specifically say CF include in the on request section. So some of the uses, like I said before, like your site on the maintenance and you just don't want anybody to go to the first page. That's one. So temporarily blocking application during maintenance. So you can restrict access based on IP address or subnet. So I suppose some variables are there to know what IP address something is coming to and coming from, and whether you can access that page. Right? And it says here grabbing generated output and performing processing on it, including stripping white space and compressing data. So here is an important note. It's important to know that if on request is used, then CodeFusion will not automatically execute the page. If that page is to be executed, it must be explicitly included in the CF include tag, like I said before. Right? So this is something. So the on request cannot be used if web services or flash remoting are needed. So I mean, web services, I don't know exactly what it is, and flash remoting, I don't know what it is. But on request cannot be used with web services or flash remoted, and I kid you not, this is the exact question they'll ask on the exam. One of these days I'll figure out a reason. So we have the application.cfc, which is a component, and we talk about the application.cfm, which you probably are more familiar with. And basically you have to think of all the properties from the application.cfc, which is accessed by the this dot whatever property name in the application.cfc. By the way, this dot name, this dot session management, or so on. So you're going to move the this and take all those properties and put it into the attribute of this application the CF application tag, right? So that's why you see CF application name equals my app, session management equals yes, session timeout. You put it in a whole long string of the app, right? And remember, the application.cfm is a standard include file. That's really what it is, right? So to get around the whole missing on application start and on session start and on request start that is missing from the application.cfc, you're gonna put all those things and say if not is defined, application.settings, or if not is defined session.shopping cart, or if not is defined request.so and so. Then you put a CF lock of type exclusive. Let the scope be whatever it applies to. So if it applies to application, the scope is application. If it applies to session, then the scope is session, and so on. So you would have, instead of the on application start, you're gonna